Stand by, folks. Just getting ready, setting up the stream. I'm going to actually start here in about 10-15 minutes. But I did want to mention that some of this stuff here is mostly exclusive to the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. Some of the stuff is available on Drive-Thru RPG. And I'm also going to be covering a little bit of DLC that comes from outside of Fantasy Grounds, which is someone I want to partner with. This is CT Nihilo. He is a prolific user in the Fantasy Grounds community. He does stuff for the Fantasy Grounds Forge. I'm going to have him on for a show, talk about his maps and such. And he has content as well, which is Cyberpunk themed. It's not officially licensed, but you could easily convert it into a Fantasy Grounds adventure, just making a few changes. I think we'll talk about that on that show. And then as far as Fantasy Grounds goes, you can also subscribe to this particular thread on the forums. So if you are familiar with Fantasy Grounds and the website, you can also take a look at this stuff here, which will give you updates. I just made a new resource link, which will be available after the video as well in the description. But these are all the different links and stuff that are related to the Fantasy Grounds or indirectly to the content and the official content. So here I have the Atlassian guide, which is essentially like the wiki guide for Cyberpunk. So if you're new to the game and you've never used Fantasy Grounds, this would be a good starting point. This would help you because you have campaign options, character creation, a character sheet, party sheet. So it goes over quite a bit of things. And then you have some basic videos and guides, and I'm going to help them build more of a video library just for more of a visual component. And then today we're going to be covering the actual DLC that's out right now. This does not include the new Chrome or Tales from the Red necessarily because they are fairly new. And I don't have any idea the dates when those will come out, but they are in work. That's all I know. And hopefully we'll have them out by summer. And it really depends on the changes that occur over time with Fantasy Grounds and the developer's time. So there is no way to put a time or date on it, but I know they're working on it. And as far as this goes, Fantasy Grounds, there are basically a ton of different DLCs. We'll take a look at those. And these address different types of instances or situations in the Fantasy Grounds rule set. So this will be really cool when you are going to start playing. Kind of gives you an idea of what's available right now that hasn't already been converted. So if you're familiar with Fantasy Grounds and you kind of know the ins and outs, you can do it even if you're new, but it helps if you know some of the ins and outs. But essentially, you can create any of the things that you want to convert into Cyberpunk. You can do so. It just takes a little time. So just a matter of how familiar you are with the platform and such. But I really like the strength of this rule set. So in other words, it is something that I wasn't clearly expecting in the beginning. It was set up as a kind of an indirect community rule set, and then they took it another step and actually got official support for it and everything else. So it's actually going to be pretty strong in regards to the Fantasy Grounds content and community. So I'm pretty happy with that. I've been talking a little bit with the developers and the people that support the rule set, trying to kind of bring everyone together and get this rule set the love it deserves, and also give Fantasy Grounds a little look in case you're wondering. Yeah, no problem, Bloodstream. Yeah, so it's a really cool rule set in regards to virtual tabletop and the way it's been developed. It's certainly shaping up to be a very strong rule set. I'm really hoping to help promote that a little. I don't really have any stake in this other than the fact that I like the rule set, and I've been a big fan of Cyberpunk, at least the role-playing game, for a long time. So I started back when the first box set was released all the way to Cyberpunk 2020. And then I kind of got out of role-playing, period, for a while. And I came back to it. And I actually tried to get this thing released. I was trying to get everyone together a few years ago, but it wasn't in the cards. And plus, Fantasy Grounds Unity had just started, so I'm kind of glad it waited, because that would have been a lot of heartache and things that people probably would have been unsatisfied with it. But now that Fantasy Grounds Unity is coming along and it's a lot stronger and stable and a lot more features, I think this is a perfect time to release it. So it really has come along a long ways in regards to the Fantasy Grounds itself. And the Cyberpunk rule set was initially a community rule set, which is free, and it's still free. Want to use that and kind of get a preview of what you're investing in. Now, I've had some pushback a little bit about the cost of the rule set, but when you actually look at it and think about all the free stuff you're getting on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, which is some of the stuff we're going to look at today, I think it's actually worth the cost and the value, because it's the core part of everything. It's kind of like what everything's based on, and then everything else branches out from there. The character wizard has certainly been a really cool addition. I kind of did a video earlier on where I kind of looked at the character wizard. I'm going to actually do a show or a class with that in the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I might stream it if I can get permission from the players, but essentially I'm going to invite 4 people on the table, and we're going to build characters using the new character wizard. You get what you pay for at Fantasy Grounds. Yeah, it does. Usually, I mean, 8 times out of 10, it's worth the investment. And I think if you put the time in and you actually take a look at it and learn how to use the platform, it is definitely worth it. There's a lot of automation that has crept into this rule set since its release. As a matter of fact, there was some pretty elaborate changes that have occurred lately. So if you guys, at the end of the video, I posted all this information, and also in the Cyberpunk thread on the Fantasy Grounds forums. This is a bunch of links for different things that you might want to look at if you're thinking about getting into Cyberpunk, or if you're a current user or a fan. This has the Atlassian. So far, I've used Fantasy Grounds for D&D, but if I did branch out, yeah, this certainly is worth it. I mean, I like the publishers and the developers, because they actually work with the community, and they don't act like they're above, that sort of thing. It's kind of like, one of those things where sometimes the developers are distant from the community because they have to focus on the content. But I'm not really getting that from the team that's working on this. They're actually taking advice, tips. They're kind of working with us, and they're not being a bunch of stuck up elitists. Sometimes you get that with certain games, rule set developers. They kind of act kind of like aloof towards the community, and I think a lot of that isn't really intentional. I think it's just because they have to focus on what they're doing. But I don't get that impression. And I try not to bug them too much. I hit them up like a couple times a month and give them some suggestions. When new content comes out, I like to look at it. And really, I'm not here trying to sell it. But if I was going to sell it, I'd have to say that this is one of the few that I would recommend in regards to Fantasy Grounds. And, D&D is kind of out there. It's already been a thing. I don't really have to necessarily push anything with that. It kind of does it on its own. But this is one of those things where I believe that it needs a little extra help in the beginning, and once it takes off, I think the community will respond to it well. And I believe that I've seen comments of people coming over from other platforms to try out the Fantasy Grounds version because it's a little bit more superior. I'm not saying that one platform is better than the other, but I think the implementation, the look of it, and the way it's been handled has been pretty positive. And to be honest, it's one of the few rule sets that I would actually put 100% behind, because it's done well. It deserves its due. It has a lot of good qualities to it. And I like the people that are working on it. That's important. So one of the things that I'd said early on was that a modern Cyberpunk rule set, like Cyberpunk Red, it really deserves a modern virtual tabletop platform. So something like Fantasy Grounds makes a whole lot of sense for playing this type of game, especially online. But you don't have to play online with this particular platform. It's self-contained, So honestly, you don't even need to be on the internet. As long as you have everything downloaded and you're set to go and you have your character sheets printed, you could essentially use this as just like your library and a tool to use for actually creating and building content, and also for playing around a table. So you could take this to a library, and even though you don't have access to the internet, it's self-contained. You don't have to be online. So if you're the game master, you can bring this to your table as your library instead of 50,000 books. Maybe I'd bring the core book just in case for the players to look at, but then as far as the game it goes, GM can run everything in Cyberpunk in Fantasy Grounds and not have to be connected to anything, which is what I really like. I'd love to read back up on the system. Yeah, I haven't played since 2020 either, really. I'm slowly getting back into it. It's not something that I'm going to just rush into, although I am doing these shows to kind of help promote the rule set and the people that are building it, but definitely want to check out some of the things that it offers. I have read a thread. If you're interested, take a look at some threads that compare 2020 with Cyberpunk Red. Really not a ton of changes. It's just like cosmetic things. I think like weapons are changed a little bit. And they've actually cleaned up some of the things with Netrunner. So Netrunners are far easier and much nicer to deal with. And if you watch the Fantasy Grounds Friday show, which was this Friday, they actually showed how the Netrunner works. So they've done a really bang-up job with that because it's really cool. And they've also incorporated the Elves Online DLC, which is kind of like playing a MMO online, but through Fantasy Grounds. So, and the Cyberpunk Red Ruleset. So if you've ever played Cyberpunk Red, they have their own MMO within the game, which is part of the culture, and you can play their MMO inside the game, inside of the Fantasy Grounds. So it's like a kind of like an infinity thing. So you're playing Cyberpunk Red with a modern virtual tabletop with the MMO. So it's kind of cool. It's a cool concept. So they were discussing that, and I put a link for that show in the links here that I'm providing. So these are the 3 shows that they've done with Fantasy Grounds so far, and those will be in the description after the video. And then this is all these links here are to the DLC, the forums thread, the drive-through RPG, the main website, and of course the early development thread for subreddit. And then there's some links here for Fantasy Grounds Academy and that sort of thing. And then I went back and looked at some of the updates, and this is just one major update. There's been a couple of these where they've added the Night City Tarot decks and all kinds of real cool stuff. So it's phenomenal. It's got a really good development queue, and I'm really happy with it. I think that if you're a Cyberpunk fan and you're not using the Fantasy Grounds edition, I think that you're missing out quite a bit. So I'm not going to really go through too much of the actual rules and how to play and all that stuff. We're going to take a look at what's available now for DLC. I'm going to call this the DLC checkpoint, which is essentially just a way of saying we're going to take a look at what's out so far. So obviously we have, if you have never used Fantasy Grounds or you're going to use it, on the right hand side I have this window open for the modules. This is all the current official or the Forge content that's available as of today, which is March 11th, 2023. Like I said, Tales from the Red and the Black Chrome are in works, so that's something that you'll have to anticipate coming up in the next few months. And then if you ever use Fantasy Grounds, go to the modules on the right hand side, open that up, and then down at the activation on the very bottom left corner of the window frame is where you would load the content. So you definitely want to get at least the basic rule set. And then there's an official DLC. This is the Red Chrome adventure that kind of comes with it. And there's the core rule set. And then all of these supplemental rules are the things that are available for either, I think most of this is free, or all of it's free on the actual Fantasy Grounds Forge. There's a lot of content here, and we're going to kind of go through those. And then our friend Anilo, he does maps that are cyberpunk themed, and they're also on the Forge. So I'm going to have him on shortly within the next couple weeks, and we're going to talk about his maps and how to kind of incorporate it into Fantasy Grounds. So that might be helpful if you want to, you know, do your own sort of conversions and that sort of thing. But for the most part, they're doing a pretty good job at keeping pace with the releases. I mean, they already have the Chrome and they're working on it, so it's not like, you know, they wait months and months later. And then on top of that, even if they get the product done, it still has to go through a QA and approval process. So just keep that in mind. Don't get too upset or crazy if the content's not coming out quick enough. So let's start from the top here. So I want to go back on just really quick on the so this is Sean SPS's content. So this is stuff that you can get online and you can kind of put it in yourself, but he's kind of went through that. And what's nice is these things add a lot of yeah, that's cool. So this stuff has been added as he gets the time to do it. And like, you got stream sheets, you got options for mobility, you got all kinds of things like weather, power gaming. Let's see what else we got. Hardware and cyber decks. There's places where you can buy stuff. There's this holiday special one. There's a garage that for weapons, for like explosives. There's all kinds of DLC that kind of touches on things that the core rules might just kind of brush on. So like you have the weather. Here's the 12 Days of Cybermass, which is like a big holiday sequel thing. Cargoes, containers, and cube hotels is like places you can stay. And then there's the tarot deck, which if you use that with the Cyberpunk Ruleset, you can also get a DLC that is on the Forge, which is a card deck type thing. So if you want to use cards in Fantasy Grounds, you have a decked out extension which helps support using cards within the Fantasy Grounds Unity Ruleset. So it's not innately part of Fantasy Grounds, but somebody, Sayed Yell's made this so that you can use it in Fantasy Grounds. It works for most of the core RPGs. So this is another extension or DLC. So this is, you know, something that might supplement your games. But this Cyberpunk Red Tarot is really cool, so I'm really excited about that. I want to check that out. And then, of course, this theme. Right now, I'm using this Cyberpunk Dark theme. There's actually the base theme that you would load without any themes at all. Oh, no way, we can use a deck. Yeah, you can, kind of, yeah. But you kind of have to use the extension, or you can use it standalone. There's ways that you can kind of use it both ways. And then there's this really beautiful kind of friendly kind of dark mode, which is really nice. There's some other reskins, but this is what the core looks like. If you haven't added anything, this is the base core, which looks pretty nice in itself. So if you've ever checked out Fantasy Grounds version, this is what the regular version looks like without any theme extensions. But if you actually subscribe to the Forge, you can get a pretty simple dark mode, which, yeah, it is very easy on the eye. So I like that. So that's the reason I have it loaded right now. And I actually themed this this overlay based on that. And I'm kind of asking for permission to see if I can distribute the overlay. So if anyone wants to stream online, they can use this overlay. But I want to check with R.Talsorian and Cyberpunk folks first, because I don't want to get busted for distributing content, you know, without their permission. So I'm going to find out shortly if we can use this, and I'm just going to post it somewhere so everyone can grab it and use it if they want. They're using for Fantasy Grounds and they use OBS, then this is the actual overlay with that. So if I don't have that on, I mean, I could just use it full screen, but that's what it looks like without the actual game. And I just kind of, some of this stuff I generated with AI, just to let you know. So these little trinkets here were created with AI. And I thought it was kind of themed because with the artificial intelligence at Cyberpunk, it kind of made sense to have AI in here. And then obviously the logo is official from their website. So that's why I want to ask. Yeah, you don't need, yeah, I don't want that. Definitely. But I'm using this for my personal use. I don't think it's a big issue right now, but if I give this out to the public, I want to make sure that Cyberpunk and R.Talsorian and the people who are working on this are represented properly. So that's kind of why I'm doing that. I could just do it and take the risk, but I'm not. I don't operate that way. Anyway, so this is the overlay, an actual rule set with the dark theme on it. So that's something that I want to get back into. So let's start covering the DLC. So what you get with the Cyberpunk adventure is when you buy the data pack and the Cyberpunk Red GMs thing and the adventure, when you actually first start opening Fantasy Grounds, you'll see a reference. So all of these adventures and all this DLC is been downloaded and enabled in the library. So now that it's available, when you click on any one of these books, like having a bookshelf, this would be basically you'd click on the reference manual, and this is the actual content like you would see in a PDF or in the hardback. And then what you do is you click on these chapters here, and you can actually look at the content as if it's like in the actual book. So you can use these page numbers, and that will bring you to different sections. And then when you actually want to run something or you want to look at something, you click on these links, and here it brings up this ice cream truck encounter. Here's an encounter table, which is something you can do, which will actually generate. So you can change this 4 below to the number of PCs. So this gives you the ability to create the number of PCs for whatever you have on the is it searchable? Yes, it is. So if you wanted to search for weapon or something, you can do so. So anything that mentions weapon, yes, it will do that. And what's really nice is, let's say you wanted to keep this information that you search for. So if you pop that open, it has a separate pop out, and then you left click and drag down to the hotkeys. And that essentially allows you to bookmark whatever it is that you're looking for. And if you don't want to fill all of your hotkeys below with a ton of links, you can actually open up something like this is my show notes that I had from the previous show. And I can open and unlock this, and I can drag any links I want into this area. So what this does is it provides me with a way to kind of manage my sessions. So everything I want to use for a session, I can link it to this. I can call this session 0 or session 1 and essentially make this a shortcut. So I don't have 50,000 links down below. I just have one comprehensive link that has either a story entry or notes, which allows you to access the content that you are researching that you want to use in your session. So this is a way that you can use Fantasy Grounds in any rule set, but this is just a tip. So if you've ever done that, this is something that you'd want to check out. So I made a map on a different session. This is the RPG. Yeah, it is way more streamlined. And then, like, this map here is not an official Cyberpunk map. This is from Anilo, a CT Anilo that I'm going to be working with. So I went ahead and put the line of sight on here, but as you can see, there's this crane that has this like emergency kind of safety thing going on. And then I have the token here, this Romero guy, he's on the combat tracker. So you can do some pretty cool stuff and here's a burn barrel with some flames on it. So you can kind of get an idea of the kinds of things you can do with Fantasy Grounds, and in this case also Cyberpunk. So pretty cool, but you can bookmark things, you can link things, and you can link other images to other images, so it's easier for you to find stuff. And one of the things I like to do is take the notes that I was showing and link those together, and then link that to the map so I'm not constantly digging around looking for it. So if I was going to use my show notes in this map, I can unlock the map, take my show notes here, or in this case it would be campaign notes, and just put a link of it on the actual map. And then I can take the map and link it to my show notes. So you kind of link it back and forth. So no matter where you are in Fantasy Grounds, you can find the content much easier. So I'll just link the map here. So now I can close this, and then all I have to do is just take this and put the windows where I want them to appear. So anything, when you first open it up in Fantasy Grounds, it actually will go in the very center. But once you size this and put it where you want it, the frame, it won't do that again. So if I close this and then I come back to a new adventure, all I have to, or a new session, all I have to do is bring up my notes, and then I can click on the map that I linked earlier, and that'll bring that up. So I'd probably have this size a little bit smaller, so it's not taking up the entire screen. And that way it's a lot easier to run this than trying to dig around looking for stuff. And that's where a lot of people get frustrated with the platform, is they not sure how to use it. Those are just some tips. Anyway, so let's go back to the kind of getting into the Fantasy Grounds part of this, but I also want to look at the DLC. So if I go into modules, you obviously you can get the data pack, which is available now on the official store. And the data pack comes with maps and some adventures and that sort of thing. So let's go to the introduction. So here, if we go through this data pack, you get scream sheets, and you also get a reference to 1 block and 2 block. So 1 block is slang for a neighborhood that borders on a combat zone. As conditions change on the street, 1 block might transform into a 2 or 3 block by being 2 or 3 blocks away from the combat zone, being safer and that sort of thing. So that's just something that you'll get with this content. And then here are the scream sheets, and then you get like artwork also. And if you click on these pages, it pops out. So if you want to right click and share any of this with your players, you can do so. And then you can, or keep it to yourself, depends on what it is. So these are just different things that you can use to enhance your game and to give you some more content to work with. So if you don't have time to build anything, that's a really nice way to go. And then here's an example of the Netrunner stuff. So this is the architecture, and this is an example of what can be done. So there's the Netrunner architecture. So if you're going to build your own networks and that sort of thing, you can drop NPC records in here. So it really makes this more streamlined when you're playing Fantasy Grounds and Cyberpunk Red. So there's something that kind of goes through. Here's an apartment building net architecture here. So it's like a graphic, but then you also have the interaction that you can have. So this has a password. It has like this control node for some drones. Probably has a control for the doors, that sort of thing. So this is a really cool way to incorporate net running and make it more streamlined, because I remember that was a hassle back in the day when you were using, even for the pen and paper edition, you almost had to have a separate session for it, for net running. I don't think that's as bad anymore with these new modern tools. And on top of that, like we used to do D&D games, and we would use those sessions to kind of supplement our net running. So if they accomplished something or got experience points in the Dungeons & Dragons games, it would translate over into our Cyberpunk game as the net run. So I kind of had 2 different games going, but I had them kind of indirectly, I don't know, kind of a symmetry or synchronicity there, so that I can keep both games going, but kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So that's something I had done in the past to keep the game going. But anyway, so this is the data pack that's available on the store. This is not free. This is a paid item on the actual store. But pretty much everything else is free. Like all the supplemental rules is all free. So here's the containers and the cube hotels. So if I open up the reference manual, which is the actual book, and click on this, it's going to bring up the artwork, the intro, all that sort of thing. You can expand this out a little bit. This talks about affordable living. You have this nice city map, which I think you should have this available at all times anyways. There's probably another version of it on the official book, But if you had this particular DLC, and this talks about the living spaces, and it actually talks about the furniture sets, some home accessories, and then if you click on these links, it brings you to the specific areas that are referenced in the DLC. So it's kind of nice to have this modularity, but also to have it all collected into a nice reference view so that you can get to where you need to go. It kind of reminds me of a modern PDF where it has links embedded in there and you can kind of skip to different pages. But this Fantasy Grounds kind of takes it to another step because you have an interactive map, you have an interactive network, and you have a bunch of modularity on top of just having the PDF. So it's kind of works hand in hand, I think, having both. And I really like to have a nice. I'm thinking about investing in just the core rulebook, just the hardback, but everything else would just be PDF. So that's kind of my own personal preference. So that's the hotels. Cyber chairs. So let's take a look at that. So again, I'm clicking on this actual module, going to the reference manual and expanding this out, double clicking on here. So this brings up some conveyance. So this are things that you can include in your games. It's for mobility. So this is just a small sample of the type of content that you can get in the Cyberpunk Red universe. So this is the Spider Cyber Chair. There's the Mercurius Cyber Chair, and there are some other notes and options on the artwork. So where I think this really is helpful is if you had a person who was disabled or had like an injury in the game, this might help them fit in, or maybe they're a net runner that are no longer mobile, and they can use this device to kind of keep them going. So if someone lost their legs in battle, or maybe a war or something like that, this would be kind of cool for that. Or just the cool factor itself would be nice. So now I'm going to go in and actually take a look at. So here's the Elflines Online, which is the MMO that I had referenced before. And this actually is the game within the game thing. So Elflines Online is essentially their version of like it's kind of like having I guess you could call it like World of Warcraft sort of thing. But it says here that it's essentially, here's the description. So Elflines Online is a massive multiplayer online game created by Segatari, which is their version of Sega and Atari merged, as a launch title for their Rush Revolution interactive brain dance headset. So if you remember, the brain dance is where you can jack into these computer systems and kind of live a different life inside of a virtual reality. So that's kind of what this Elflines is about. And the players face off against the forces of darkness and enemy players in or on the CityNet servers, which is their internal Night City kind of network. It's kind of like social media and a network combined. And they're competing for the best items and server-first boss kills. In the wake of the game's release, the Elflines franchise has expanded to include the Network 55 show, the Elflines Online Chronicles, various plushies, and even a limited edition Sacred Herbs Kibble, which is food, by the Continental Brands, complete with collectible packaging. So that's pretty cool. I really like that idea, so that you have the ways that you can use the online MMO within the game. So you can make a game within the game, essentially. And they covered this on the Fantasy Grounds Friday show. So if you're interested, that's what this Elflines thing is. And when you have the DLC, when you actually install it and enable it, what it does is, if you are going to create a character for the MMO, you bring up the characters and you have this little button here. It says sign up for Elflines Online. So if you click on that, you can actually make your own character for the Elflines Online, which is kind of cool. So it's like a little sub character for your PC or your player in the actual game. So it's kind of cool. So that's what the Elflines is. And now if we come down here, there's some hardened lieutenants, some NPCs is roughly what you're getting with that. And this is break glass in case of power gaming. So in case you got people that are wiping you out, or you need some tough bosses or somebody that's really badass. There you go. So hardened is a prefix that means combat optimized. It defines a tier of play that is designed to provide adequate challenges to combat optimized characters while still letting them be combat badasses, all without disrupting game economy or scaling up the number of enemies, blah, blah, blah. So this will help you supplement your game. If you have people that are just kicking butt and kind of plowing through your sessions, this is going to give you some NPCs. So there's some hardened lieutenants, and then there's some paths here that you can take to kind of help you with that. Some really cool artwork, by the way. And it looks like a table that you can roll on. So you can roll, and this will come out in the chat. It says, Lieutenant is grappling a human shield. Find the human shield section in the linked area. So there are some really cool outcomes for these tables if you're going to use this. One of the options is Lieutenant has a tactical skill base of 16 and is in command. So you have a lot of options here to use in your game. So this kind of adds little supplemental things. They're not huge, but they are essentially pretty well managed. They look good. They have the reference manual. So this one is a Cyberware Deals. This is another DLC. So there's a title page, and then you get the introduction. So this is basically when you want to buy stuff, and this is going to give you new Chrome. So there's an appetite controller, the Cyber Pillow, an external vid screen, holo projector palm. So it's like you have your cell phone kind of like built into your hand, but it's waterproof. It's covered up by your wetsuit. It's great for checking the news while you're surfing. And it's a CyberArm option, so a hologram projector built into the user's palm. It can output on potentially interactive holographic projections, roughly the size of a soda can, when linked on it to an agent. So it can be installed as your only cyberware in a Meet arm. So that's kind of cool. So you have a lot of options for DLC. So what you're getting here are just things that you can use to supplement your game. They're just little tidbits here and there that really helps improve the game. And I like the little splash things because they're small. They're not like a huge whopping book. I think the Black Chrome will kind of be more of a Bible for content, like, you know, for cybernetics and gear. But it's kind of nice to have all these little theme supplements kind of keep us waiting and hungry for the drop of the other content that has more weapons and cybernetics and stuff. So that's what you're getting with the rule set. So you get the rule set. If you want the pack, you can get that, which is additional encounters and that sort of thing. You get a free kind of a one-shot type thing, I believe, with the book. There is a story to it. There's some notes, and then you get all these freebies on the DLC for the Fantasy Grounds Forge. So all of this stuff down here, all this little small things, are all free. And then obviously there's the core rules is going to cost in the Cyberpunk data pack, but everything else is pretty much free. So that's and the theme. So I think that, you know, it's a good step in the right direction. It doesn't feel overly corporatized or too weird, or like, you know, somebody's trying to do a big money grab here. It really just seems like in line with what I would hope for a, you know, for an online or even a face-to-face game. So it's pretty cool. So the core rulebook at this point is $60, but if that's too much and then you're also buying Fantasy Grounds, you can always wait for it to go on sale. I mean, I've seen sales start as soon as less than a month after the content's been released. So if you're not too keen on buying it right now, you can always wait for one of the sales. They usually have a pretty good sized summer sale, so maybe you'll save a little bit then. But usually on anything brand new, they try not to sale price those, but after about a month, you'll start seeing this stuff roll through weekly, and every once in a while you'll see a sale on Cyberpunk or D&D or whatever. So if you're on the actual store, go to the Fantasy Grounds store or the shop, you'll be able to tell if something's on sale, because it's usually on the very top and then it kind of rolls away as the next week comes. So pay attention to the Fantasy Grounds newsletter, because that's where they'll announce that kind of stuff. A lot of people say, well, I didn't know there was a sale. Well, there's a newsletter, and you're pretty good about announcing that stuff ahead of time. So they kind of give you an idea, like this week we're having all this stuff for sale. So it looks like they have Loresmith, and they have some Pathfinder stuff, and then there's some sales on some other content. So if you like, for instance, if you like Fallout, there's sales on some of that stuff too. So just keep an eye on that, and you don't necessarily have to pay full price right now. You can wait. And then there is, like I said, for Cyberpunk, there are a couple DLC, or one DLC and the rule set right now, the official rule set. Thank you for following Thornborn. Thank you. So this is just a way to see what's happening. And like I said, this is the free theme that Sean put out. But this is the actual. So here's the Cyberpunk Red Data Pack, which is $10. And then you have the rule set right now. There might probably Chrome will be in the store, the black Chrome, maybe the other Tales from the Red. But this is all stuff that you are going to be able to get when you're able to. I like this. You know, it's still kind of small. It's not overly saturated yet. And then, of course, you have this very supportive DLC that comes out of the Forge. So if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you've never used the content, if you look at this here, if you want to know if the line of sight's already been done, it'll say it here, this little symbol, LOS, and then this little FGU will actually show you what is available on the store. So if you're on the store page, you'll be able to see that actual content when you go to the page, the store page. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind when you're actually using Fantasy Grounds and the Cyberpunk Red Ruleset. So you have a lot of really cool stuff available. I'm pretty happy with that, because you can benefit by subscribing to the newsletter and getting a couple coins on the Fantasy Grounds Forge, and of course there's all that freebie stuff. So it's really decent rule set, and I really like the community. So if there's anything else you guys want me to show you, let me know now while I'm here. I'm kind of babbling for over 45 minutes, so I don't want to keep babbling and saying nonsense like I have been the last 10 minutes. So if anybody has anything they want to see before we go, I will be willing to show you. I got most of the content here. Like I said, I could show the character wizard. I'm not going to go through that process, but I'll show that. So if I go to characters and I start using the character wizard that's built in, essentially what this will do is let you build using the 3 methods that are described in the book. So you have the street rat method, the edge runner method, and the complete package. So if you don't have time, or you're new to Fantasy Grounds and the platform, you can use the rule set. You can use the streamline street rat. Edge runner is kind of a balance between kind of building your own, but also using some of the presets. And the complete package is completely making your own custom character. So that's some really cool stuff there. That's your kind of your path choice there. And then once you go beyond that, then you actually start. Let's say you wanted to make a nomad, then you can pick one of these other methods and then click on nomad, and it would take you to that particular build. You can read about it before you start. If you click on nomad and edge runner, then what will happen is if I click next here on the bottom, and it takes me to the character wizard, where you can start building and optimizing your character sheet. So it does a really good job with character management. And if I pull up Romero here, which is kind of my test character, I use the second option because I wasn't quite ready to build a fully customizable character. But you have the gear section, your actions section, and a lot of these things are rollable. So you can double click on some of these things and it'll roll in the chat right from the character sheet. And then here's my cybernetics. And then here are some life path things in your background and that sort of stuff. Things that for role playing. And then, of course, you have your skill section where you manage your improvement points and add skills and improve them and such. And then your main tab is where a lot of the stuff is. So you can actually roll off these in most cases. So here's items that are equipped or not. You can change that. So just imagine trying to do this all manually, and then figuring out how to do it in Fantasy Grounds. On top of that, so that it can automate half of the things you'd have to do at a table. It keeps track of a lot of things in the combat tracker. So lots of DLC, lots of automation, really cool character builder, and a supportive community. So those are the main things I wanted to point out about this rule set. So I'm going to stay on for another couple minutes. If you guys want to look at anything else, let me know. So just kind of looking through what you can get and the sort of things that you might want to incorporate in your games. Like I said earlier, you can make your own session notes and link everything to that, so it's really streamlined and you're not digging around in the interface for it. It's just a little bit of prep work, just dragging links and stuff. It's not too bad. So that's that. And like I said, I had that map up here earlier where I was actually taking this and kind of making it for my own thing. And then if I zoom in the map a little closer, like I actually put waves on the water, and then there's safety rails on the actual walkway, so in case the characters want to go down to the water level, hop on one of these boats, they don't fall off the edge. And then, like I said, you have different things here. So like this is a upper level. So if I move to Romero here, I can move him up onto that platform. So this is supposed to be a higher level. So when he's up there, I can actually open this up so he'll be able to see all around the whole thing and have a better 360 view. And then the container over here is kind of the same way. So when you're walking around, you see the shadow actually goes around the container. But when you go climb up on this thing, you can see there's like a broken doorway, and these are open, so it's probably a hovel or like where someone lives. But if you climb up on top of this thing, you shouldn't see that shadow anymore, and you open this up, and it doesn't give you the shadow because you're up on top of it. So there's different cool things that you can do. And now with the token height indicator, you had an NPC over on this actual platform, and you want to calculate the height of this from the ground. I think what you'll be able to do, let me go into NPC. I'm just going to grab somebody. That's a vehicle. Let's go with a hardened lieutenant. So here is a reclaimer chief. Here's an officer, raid officer. So I'll put him on the combat tracker, and then I will also drag him over onto the map, and then set him here. So in my mind, this actual height of this thing is at least 25 feet, and he's probably 15 feet from the ground up on top of this. So what I could do is set the height of this. So this guy is 25 feet. So if I click on the token, and I believe you hold the Alt key, you can put how many meters they are off the ground. So we'll just say like maybe he's 20 meters. I don't know what the conversion is off the top of my head, but they do it in meters. And then this guy over here might be, I don't know, 10. Just for the sake of height. So he's 10 meters off the ground. This guy is 20 meters off the ground. So now if I target by holding down the right control key, so if I have possession of Romero and I click on this guy here, you can potentially target each other. So here it says targeting the officer, and then you can actually get the feel for roughly, how far they would be away, that sort of thing, and that would help you with that. So just a matter of what your needs are for the table. But it's kind of cool because it does have some of the meters calculated in there. And it does depend on the options in Fantasy Grounds. So if you go down to the diagonal distance, the 1.5 is for triangular distance, which is a better thing. And then you have raw, which is going to calculate every little thing. And then the default is just, you know, counting squares essentially. And 1. But the 1.5 actually incorporates Pythagorean's theorem. So, you know, this distance, and in a triangular configuration, it calculates that. So like every other square is 1.5 times if you want to do it that way. So anyways, that's just some things that you'll be able to do in Fantasy Grounds. Hopefully this helps a little bit, and encourage you guys to check out the new rule set and give it a chance. In the links after the show, you will find all of the stuff that I discussed in links and some more, and you'll also have some resources. So take care, everyone. I think I'm going to go. I don't see any more questions or anything. I hope all of you guys are having a good weekend. Enjoy yourself and check out Cyberpunk.